Hello, this is Jonathan Birkland, the Chief Content Officer of the Finance Lab. Today we're going to talk about applying Nash's equilibrium to M&A negotiations. I first learned my craft on Wall Street in the 1980s, a very different era characterized by the bravado of Gordon Gekko's greed is good speech. During that period, I was taught all negotiations are zero-sum games. If I win, you lose, period. That dated philosophy is best illustrated by the graph line with a negative slope. If there are only 8 marbles in a negotiation, the curve would look like this. If I ended up with all 8 marbles at the end of the negotiations, well, I'd be considered Rambo. If I split the difference and ended up with only 4 of the marbles, that would be viewed as a wimpy compromise. And God forbid, I lost all 8 marbles. I may as well not go back to the office. 2 experiences caused me to change my view. First, I sold my own business, believe it or not, to the second highest bidder. Second, I was fortunate enough to study organizational behavior under Dr. Robert Bontempo at Columbia Business School. He taught me a range of highly useful management theories, but the most impactful on me was Nash's equilibrium. Investopedia defines Nash's equilibrium as the solution to a game in which 2 or more players have a strategy, and with each participant considering an opponent's choice, he has no incentive, nothing to gain, by switching his strategy. In the Nash equilibrium, each player's strategy is optimal when considering the decision of other players. Every player wins because everyone gets the outcome they desire. The quick test to see if Nash's equilibrium exists: reveal to each player the other's strategy. If no one changes his strategy, then the Nash equilibrium is proven. At Columbia, Dr. Bontempo divided us into groups of 2. One player was the buyer of a business, the other the seller. Each player was given a set of criteria: price, employee retention, non-compete, etc. These criteria were ranked by importance to that player. The idea was to negotiate a deal that was in the 3rd quadrant shown above, in which both sides are winners. The catch was, one player could not share the priority list with the other. I thought, with all my years of Wall Street experience, this was going to be child's play. So, I morphed into my Gordon Gekko persona and got to work. And proceeded to get the lowest score in the class. Why? My attempt to win all points, rather than pursue compromise, resulted in the seller leaving negotiation. Humbled, I examined the reason for my failure. Simply put, I was using the old 1980s zero-sum game approach to a complex situation. Fortunately, real-life application of Nash's equilibrium can differ from game theory exercises. In these exercises, one player must guess the other's criteria or decision-making process. In M&A negotiations, you can ask, I know this sounds naive. After all, one is not allowed to disclose too much in negotiations, right? Wrong. Frankly, inexperienced people play by that rule. Professionals know that those games dramatically slow down and sometimes derail the closing process. How do you initiate an open and frank dialogue with the other side? Through trial and error, I developed this approach. First, you want to build trust. Do this by being very candid about your side's issues and goals. For example, I will have a warts and all conversation early in the process. This conversation has 2 mutually exclusive results. The counterparty may either appreciate the frank dialogue and become more transparent with you, or bail out on the transaction altogether. Don't worry if you get the latter outcome. All it means is that you ended the discussions early in the process and saved a lot of brain damage. Second, do your homework, but don't be afraid to be the dumbest person in the room. Great interviewers have several things in common, including 1. doing their research and using it to create a game plan for the discussion. 2. Being sincerely self-deprecating. 3. Asking relevant follow-up questions. And 4. Getting out of the way when the other side starts talking. At this point, use your prepared questions effectively but sparingly to steer the discussion. Feather the questions into the discussion so it's more of an open exchange of information than an interrogation. If you initiate the lowering of your defenses and share information from your side, you'll create an open environment and learn what you need to learn more efficiently. Third, avoid the phrase deal breaker. Of course deals can reach an impasse, most of which are resolvable, some may not be. But remember that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Saying the term deal breaker can cause the other side to dig in. When you reach such an impasse, the best response is to back up, check your ego at the door, and reach out to the other side and say something like, "Hey, we have a tricky issue I need your help resolving." That will create an environment where both sides will discuss their concerns and ways to address them. If you take this approach, more often you're going to find a solution and come to a successful closing of your transaction. Okay, now back to Dr. Nash. Once you've established an open dialogue, don't be afraid to ask direct questions. For example, besides valuation, what other criteria are you using to factor into your decision? Be an active listener by asking pertinent follow-up questions. For example, why is employee retention important to you? You can then create what I call a Nash scorecard. This lists the acquisition and sale criteria in terms of importance to the relative party. Above is an example. Once you have the Nash scorecard, the structure of the transaction becomes apparent. In the above example, the seller looks willing to compromise on price in exchange for employee retention. This aligns well with the buyer's priorities. Now for a real-life example. My investment banking firm, River Corporate Advisors, was engaged to advise the sale of a healthcare services company that was 50-50 owned by two brothers. After the initial marketing process, we obtained an offer that was acceptable to both brothers. However, prior to executing the letter of intent, one brother, let's call him Brother 1, suddenly informed the team that he believed that he had a greater role in growing the business over its 10-year history and, therefore, deserved a greater share of the sale proceeds. The second brother did not accept this premise and chose to hold the line and stick with the original agreement between them, saying a deal is a deal. Rock, meet hard place. I attempted to broker a deal between the brothers before going back to the potential buyer. Would you take 55-45, 53-47, 52-48? No, no, and no. I had defaulted back to the old zero-sum game rules of negotiations and predictably failed. Fortunately, the company's chief operating officer and longtime counselor of the brothers' family intervened. He had a piece of vital information. The brothers owned a piece of real estate with their two sisters, each owning 25% of a building. Brother 1 had lost interest in the real estate holding long ago. So with this new information, the Nash scorecard had evolved to the following. Nash's equilibrium was achieved by providing Brother 1 with an additional 2% of the company in exchange for his real estate interest. Neither brother changed his strategy, which meant we had Nash's equilibrium, and we proceeded to close the transaction. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to come visit us at www.thefinancelab.net, and that's .net as in net present value. Thank you very much.